You know, when you receive an invitation in the mail, there's this expectation of choice, right?
Yeah, like for a dinner party or something.
Right, a wedding, a dinner party, you get this nice envelope, the font is, very elegant, but the agency is entirely yours. You just check yes or no.
Mm-hmm. It's just a request. I mean, you have the autonomy to decline without any real consequences, other than maybe a disappointed host.
Right, but then think about when you encounter a royal decree, it's a summons from an actual sovereign. Suddenly the RSVP box is just gone.
Oh, yeah, totally gone.
You are looking at a demand that carries the full weight of the crown. You don't get to, consult your calendar or weigh your options.
It is an absolute directive. I mean, compliance is expected, and the stakes for ignoring it are just monumental.
Yeah.
A decree requires a total reorientation of your schedule and your priorities.
And today, we are looking at what is basically the ultimate royal decree. We are embarking on a deep dive into the source material surrounding Psalm 96.
Mm-hmm. It's a massive text.
It really is. We're going to figure out why a group of ancient refugees sang a song that essentially declared theological war on the greatest empires in the world.
Right.
So we are bringing you, the listener, into a rigorous theological examination of this text. Our sources include a giant stack of historical commentaries, linguistic studies, and theological analyses.
And we are going to trace the historical roots of this text first.
Yeah, we'll look at its literary setting and then break down the passage into three distinct movements. We have the universal summons to all the earth, the specific demand for holy worship, and the cosmic rejoicing over a coming judge.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, we will look at how the entire text culminates in a much larger redemptive picture. So let's start with the historical context. Where does this text actually come from?
Well, the commentaries point us directly to a Davidic origin.
Okay.
To understand the genesis of this text, you have to look at the historical narrative in 1 Chronicles 16, specifically verses 7 through 36. That passage reveals that the core substance of this text was initially delivered by King David. He handed it to Asaph and his brethren for a very specific, monumental occasion.
And that was bringing the Ark of the Covenant up to the tabernacle on Mount Zion.
Spot on.
Let's give some context on the Ark for you listening, because this was not just, a fancy gold box.
Oh, far from it. I mean, the Ark of the Covenant represented the localized, glorious presence of Yahweh. It was considered the literal footstool of his throne on earth.
Wow.
And for centuries, the Israelites had been a migratory people. The Ark moved with them through the wilderness, into various battles. It rested in temporary locations.
Right, it was always on the move.
Yeah, so installing it in Jerusalem on Mount Zion marked a massive transition. It moved the people of Israel from a wilderness existence into a permanent seat of worship and sovereign rule.
So David is basically establishing Jerusalem as the epicenter of God's administration.
Right.
Okay, so originally this was David's song of triumph for that specific day of national consolidation. But our sources reveal a second, perhaps even more fascinating historical layer, a post-exilic layer.
Yeah, the Septuagint, which is the early Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, provides a superscription for this text.
Okay.
And it attributes a liturgical adaptation of this specific song to the period when the Second Temple was being rebuilt, so well after the Babylonian captivity.
Let's paint a picture of that reality for a second. The Babylonians had come in, decimated Jerusalem, burned the original temple to the ground, and dragged the population off into exile.
Right, total devastation.
And then generations pass. Now, a small, embattled remnant of Israelites is finally allowed to return to a ruined city. They're trying to rebuild, but they are surrounded by the massive, dominating Persian Empire.
Yeah.
And highly hostile neighbors in the ancient Near East.
The psychological and theological toll of that situation, I mean, it cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
In the ancient Near Eastern mindset, gods were intensely local.
Right, tied to the land.
Yeah, tied to specific geographies. You had a god of the mountain, a god of the valley, a god of a specific city-state.
Okay.
The basic assumption of the ancient world was that if your city was destroyed and your temple was burned, your local god was defeated.
Wow.
The victorious empire's god was supreme.
Wait, so if I am standing in the rubble of Jerusalem and I'm surrounded by Persian wealth and, Babylonian ziggurats, singing a song about how my God rules the world.
It looks completely delusional.
Yeah. If I am a Persian governor or a Babylonian guard hearing this tiny group of refugees singing this, I am laughing at them. I mean, their God couldn't even protect his own house.
Which is why this text is so subversively brilliant. For this small remnant to stand in the rubble and sing "The Lord reigns" was an act of aggressive, defiant faith.
Right.
It completely shattered that whole pagan concept of local, territorial deities. They were declaring that their Maya was not a defeated tribal deity who lost a war to Marduk. They were asserting that their God is the sovereign creator of the entire world, undiminished by the Babylonian exile. The exile was actually his judgment upon them, not a failure of his strength.
Man. So they are declaring universal kingship from a pile of rocks.
Spot on.
That just reframes the entire text. It changes it from a happy, generic worship song into a massive theological protest.
It really does.
Now, what about the literary context? Where does this sit in the broader collection of the Psalms? Our sources locate this in Book 4 of the Psalms, which covers chapters 90 through 106.
Right. And Book 4 is structurally designed as the theological answer to the crisis of the exile.
Okay.
If you read through the Psalms in order, you hit a massive wall at the end of Book 3. Psalm 89 ends in sheer agony.
Oh, yeah.
The writer is looking at the destruction of the Davidic throne, the burning of the city, and asking if God's promises have failed. The earthly monarchy is dead.
So Book 4 steps in to answer that crisis.
Yes. It shifts the gaze away from the failed earthly monarchs and points the reader directly to the eternal celestial monarch.
And within Book 4, Psalm 96 belongs to a specific cluster known as the enthronement psalms or the theocratic psalms.
Yeah, these specific texts are grouped together because they are characterized by the Hebrew acclamation Yahweh Malak, which means the Lord reigns.
Okay.
They hammer home the reality of God's absolute sovereignty over the entire earth, regardless of what is happening politically on the ground.
Here is where the literary placement gets incredibly intense, I think. If you look at the text immediately preceding this one, Psalm 95, it ends on a terrifying note.
It really does.
It concludes with a severe warning of judgment and exclusion for unbelieving Israel. It references the historical rebellion at Meribah and Massah in the wilderness.
Right.
God swears in his wrath that generation will not enter his rest. And then immediately, the very next breath in the Psalter is Psalm 96, which violently pivots to summon all the earth and the heathen or the nations, the goyim.
And that juxtaposition is deliberate. The literary logic is devastatingly clear for a Jewish reader.
How so?
If the physical descendants of Abraham harden their hearts and prove obstinate, God's glory will not be diminished. His global purposes cannot be thwarted by local rebellion.
Wow.
The text immediately turns outward, showing that God's kingdom will encompass the entire world. The failure of a specific generation of Israelites does not stall the engine of God's redemptive plan.
It expands the invitation to the nations.
Precisely.
So we have the historical roots in David and the exile, and the literary setting answering the crisis of the failed earthly kingdom. The commentaries divide the internal logic of the text into three main sections. We will look at verses 1 through 6, which cover the universal summons and the supreme creator.
Right.
Then verses 7 through 10, outlining the demand for holy worship and proclamation. Finally, verses 11 through 13, detailing the cosmic rejoicing and the coming judge.
Sounds good.
Let's jump right into the first section. We are looking at verses 1 through 3. I'm reading from the English translation here, and it says, "O sing unto the Lord a new song. Sing unto the Lord, all the earth. Sing unto the Lord, bless his name. Show forth his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the heathen, his wonders among all people." The first thing that jumps off the page is the sheer repetition. Sing, sing, sing.
Yeah, the Hebrew text utilizes a threefold repetition of the imperative shiru, which translates to sing.
Okay.
As we examine the syntax, we understand that repetitions like this are never accidental. This is a triadic call, a majestic structural marker directed at kol haaretz, all the earth. It is a comprehensive demand.
And it specifically calls for a new song, a shir chadash. Now, a modern reader might see that and think, okay, we need to throw out the old hymnals and write a fresh piece of sheet music.
Right.
But the commentaries clarify that this does not mean a chronologically recent composition.
No, not at all. A new song in this biblical context is a fresh, redemptive response to God's continuous, active, saving deeds.
Okay.
His mercies are not dead events trapped in ancient history. They are alive and active in the present. Therefore, the praise must be vigorous, alive, and matching the freshness of those mercies.
Let me offer an analogy to help clarify this for you listening. Imagine a city that has been under a brutal siege for years. People are starving, the walls are crumbling, the enemy is relentless.
Bleak situation.
Yeah, totally bleak. Then, suddenly, The invading army is defeated, the gates are thrown open, and rescue arrives this very morning.
Oh, wow.
The citizens are not going to gather at the town square and sing an old ballad about a minor border skirmish from 400 years ago.
No, they wouldn't.
They're going to sing a new song because the rescue is fresh, the relief is visceral, and the reality of their salvation just altered their entire existence. The magnitude of the current rescue demands a current, explosive response.
That captures the theological reality really well. The salvation is current, so the response must be equally current.
Right. And speaking of the verbs used here, verse 2 commands the listener to bless, that's baraku, and proclaim, or show forth basaru.
Okay.
Our linguistic sources note that these verbs are structured in a specific grammatical form that denotes intensive, active, and deliberate action.
So this isn't just a gentle suggestion to have, like, warm feelings about God.
Far from it. The specific verb form acts like an aggressive, intentional command. It requires deliberate follow-through. When the text says to bless his name, it is commanding you to actively, openly, and deliberately extol his revealed character.
Yeah.
You are intentionally pronouncing blessing upon his name in a public manner.
And that second verb, basaru, for proclaim or show forth, our sources highlight that this has a massive theological weight attached to it.
It does. The root of basaru is the Hebrew word for bringing good news or glad tidings.
Oh, really?
Yes. It is the linguistic ancestor of the concept of the gospel.
Hmm.
The command is to herald his salvation as an evangel, as good news. Furthermore, the specific Hebrew word used here for salvation is yeshwado, which points directly to the name Yeshua.
Yes.
Wow.
The text is commanding the covenant community to herald this saving news day by day. Verse 3 follows this up with another intensive command.
Let's see. Declare his glory among the heathen.
Right. Declare, which is saparu. This means to publicly recount, to narrate, to make known. The internal joy of singing is commanded to overflow into the external work of public declaration among the nations.
So you cannot keep the news contained within your own borders.
Exactly. Well, precisely. It has to go out.
So we have this massive, active, intensive summons to all the earth. Now we move to verses 4 through 6, and we get the why. Why is this universal praise demanded? Verse 4 says, "For the Lord is great and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods."
The Hebrew word for great here is gadol. This indicates an infinite qualitative distinction.
Okay, so not just a little bigger.
Right. The text is not saying God is just slightly more powerful than other beings, like a heavyweight champion compared to a lightweight. He is in an entirely different category of existence.
Oh, wow.
The phrase, to be praised, translates a word that indicates he is inherently worthy of praise. It is not just that people happen to praise him or that he needs their praise to feel validated. His very nature demands it, objectively.
So let's look at the word for feared. What kind of fear were we talking about here?
The word is nora. It carries the sense of awe-inspiring dread.
Dread.
Yeah, it is a holy reverence that recognizes the absolute majesty of the Creator. It is not a cowering terror of an unpredictable abuser, but a profound, well, a highly visceral respect that absolutely destroys casual familiarity.
So you do not approach this being as a buddy?
No, absolutely not.
Now, here is a detail from the sources I found incredibly fascinating. There's a specific wordplay used to mock false gods in verse 5. For all the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord made the heavens.
Yeah.
It sounds like a straightforward statement of fact in English, but what is happening under the hood in the original Hebrew?
The author uses a devastating phonetic pun. The pagan nations boast of their gods, calling them Elohim, but the psalmist dismisses them by calling them Elohim.
Elohim versus Eliam.
Yes, Elohim is a term that signifies worthless nothings or feeble vanities.
Wow.
It is a direct linguistic mockery. The author is saying, you call them Elohim, but they are actually Elohim. It highlights the ontological vacuity of false religion.
Ontological vacuity, meaning they literally have no substance or existence.
Correct. The text draws a sharp line. The idols are made things, and they are nothing. But Yahweh is the maker of the heavens.
Right.
There is an infinite gap between the creator and the created, let alone the creator and the fabricated blocks of wood and stone.
That is a total theological assault on the surrounding cultures.
It really is.
Then, in verse 6, the text lists 4 specific attributes. Honor and majesty are before him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. Let's break those down.
Sure. The first two terms, splendor, which is hod, and majesty, hedar, denote royal, kingly excellency. They are the attributes of a sovereign ruler seated on a throne, possessing absolute authority. The second two terms, strength, oz, and beauty, tiferet, denote the fortitude and holy adornment found specifically in his sanctuary.
Oh, I see.
It combines absolute, unyielding might with flawless, sacred purity.
So looking at this whole first section, what did the author intend for the original audience? What was supposed to happen in the minds of the returning exiles when they sang this?
Well, the authorial intent was to completely demolish syncretism.
Right.
The Israelites were constantly tempted to blend religious beliefs, viewing Yahweh as just one local god among many in a crowded spiritual marketplace.
Yeah.
By contrasting the maker of the heavens with the Elohim, the nothings of Babylon and Canaan, the author intended the audience to look at those massive pagan pantheons and literally laugh at them as nonentities.
Wow.
Furthermore, it was meant to cure Israel's ethnic isolationism. Instead of hiding in a fortress mentality, thinking God was only a tribal deity for them, this text demanded a global, outward-facing zeal. They were supposed to realize that their God was the only true God, and therefore every single nation on earth owed him worship.
Let's bring this to the listener today. How do our commentaries apply this ancient text to modern believers? It seems to demand an absolute, resolute dedication to global missions.
Yes.
If God is the only creator, keeping that knowledge to a localized group is a failure to recognize his universal jurisdiction.
That is the direct application drawn from the text. It systematically dismantles pluralism. The text insists there are no alternative paths to the divine.
Right.
If all other gods are Elohim, worthless nothings, then the worship of them is not an alternate route to truth. It is a dead end.
Now, we are going to report on a specific modern application our sources make here regarding modern church movements.
Okay.
And we are neutrally conveying the source author's specific theological critiques here. The author of our source text contends that this passage directly refutes two specific modern phenomena: seeker-sensitive evangelicalism and the prosperity gospel.
Let's trace the logic of why the source makes this connection.
Yeah. The argument is that the majesty and awe-inspiring dread, that Nora we discussed,
Right.
presented in verse 4, leaves absolutely no room for a therapeutic, consumer-driven approach to religion.
The source argues that seeker-sensitive models often reduce the infinite majesty of God to a commodity for human consumption.
Okay.
Attempting to make the church experience primarily entertaining or comfortable for the unchurched. The source contends this is entirely antithetical to the command to fear him above all gods with awe-inspiring dread.
Right.
You cannot simultaneously harbor holy dread and demand a comfortable, entertaining consumer experience.
And regarding the prosperity gospel, because our sources bring that up too.
Well, the source points out that the salvation we are commanded to show forth is a rescue from divine justice and sin, not a rescue from earthly poverty or sickness.
I see.
Therefore, the source maintains that promising temporal financial wealth rather than demanding holy reverence for the Creator falls entirely outside the parameters of the biblical text. The focus in Psalm 96 is on giving God his due glory, not extracting earthly riches from him.
That brings us nicely to the second section of the passage, verses 7 through 10, which outline the demand for holy worship and proclamation. The text shifts the gears here. Verse 7 reads, "Give unto the Lord, O ye kindreds of the people, give unto the Lord glory and strength." We have a new triad of commands here.
Yeah, the verb shifts to habu, translated as give or ascribe.
What does that actually look like in practice?
It means to render or attribute to God what is already due to him by right. You are not handing God something he lacks, as if he is deficient in glory until you provide it.
Oh, right.
You are acknowledging and declaring the glory and strength he already possesses. And notice the specific target audience of this command.
The kindreds or families of the peoples, the mishpeshot amim.
Right.
I wanted to ask about that. Why does the text specify families rather than just calling out to individuals? Why not just say every individual person on earth give glory to God? Why group them by family units?
Well, this reflects the covenantal structure of the biblical worldview.
Okay.
In this theological framework, society is not viewed merely as a massive collection of autonomous, disconnected individuals. Communities, clans, and households are summoned together under covenant heads.
That makes sense.
The call is for whole family units, tribal structures, and societal blocks to recognize the sovereignty of God collectively. It is a communal submission, not just private, individualistic agreement.
Verse 8 continues the command. Give unto the Lord the glory due unto his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. What kind of offering are we talking about here? Is this like an animal sacrifice?
The Hebrew word used here is mincha. This specifically refers to a bloodless tribute or a grain
A
offering.
grain offering.
Yeah. In the political landscape of the ancient Near East, subject nations would bring a mincha to a great conquering king as a sign of submission, fealty, and taxation.
Oh, okay.
The visual here is powerful. The text envisions the peoples of the earth acting as loyal, conquered subjects, carrying a royal tribute into the courts of the supreme king. It is a posture of absolute political and spiritual submission.
That posture of submission is emphasized even more intensely in verse 9. Oh, worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Fear before him all the earth.
No.
And let's look at that verb, worship. What is the root action there?
The Hebrew word is hishtachawo. This is a reflexive form of the verb for bowing down.
Reflexive.
Yes. The reflexive nature means you are doing this to yourself. You are actively placing yourself in a physical and spiritual posture of absolute self-humbling prostration.
You're putting your face in the dirt.
Spot on. It is not just mental admiration from a distance. It is a literal bowing down before a supreme authority.
And they're commanded to do this in the beauty of holiness, Behadrat Kodesh. Our commentaries clarify that this phrase carries a few layers of meaning regarding how one approaches God.
It signifies holy attire, reverent consecration, and a setting marked by sacred beauty. It requires approaching God in a manner that is fitting to his flawless character.
Right.
And this prostration is coupled with the command to fear, which is chill. This specific word implies a visceral trembling.
Visceral trembling, like literally shaking.
Yes, a physical writhing or shaking. It completely destroys any concept of a flippant, casual, or overly familiar approach to the divine.
Yeah.
When you combine absolute physical prostration, hishtachawu, with visceral trembling, chill, you get a picture of worship that is characterized by overwhelming awe and holy dread. It is the opposite of casual.
Then we hit verse 10, which acts as a hinge for the entire passage. Say among the heathen that the Lord reigneth. The world also shall be established that it shall not be moved. He shall judge the people righteously. We have the imperative say.
This commissions the audience as heralds. They are commanded to declare a specific objective truth, Yahweh Malak, the Lord reigns.
Right, the enthronement formula we brought up earlier.
Yes. It is a public decree that the Creator is actively governing the universe right now. He has taken his seat of authority, and the world is stabilized because of it.
And the result of that active reign is that he judges the people righteously or with equity. Our sources focus on the Hebrew word used there, meshurim.
Meshurim conveys the idea of perfect uprightness, straightness, and fairness. It means that God's administration of justice is never crooked, never biased, never bought, and never corrupt.
Okay.
His reign brings absolute moral straightness to a world twisted by sin.
So analyzing the authorial intent for this specific middle section, the sources observe that these verses were designed to produce holy fear and reverence in the original audience.
Yes, the intent was to move the returning exiles away from any casual familiarity with God. By demanding tribute, prostration, and trembling, the text solidifies the infinite gap between the king and the subject.
Right.
Furthermore, it commissioned the audience to act as public heralds. It shifted their worship from a private, internal inheritance to a public, vocal declaration of a coming kingdom.
They were required to say among the heathen what they knew to be true, regardless of the political consequences. Bringing this application to you, the listener, today. The commentaries focus heavily on the concept of ordered, reverent worship.
The theological application presented in our sources relies on a concept known as the regulative principle of worship.
Let's break that down.
This is the theological conviction that worship must be conducted strictly according to what God has prescribed in Scripture, stripping away carnal distractions, fleshly mysticism, and manipulative emotionalism.
Okay.
Because God explicitly demands to be worshipped in the beauty of holiness and with visceral trembling, the application is that human inventions or preferences in worship are unacceptable. God dictates the terms of engagement.
The author of our source text makes another sharp critique here, targeting modern, pragmatic worship styles.
Yeah.
Let's trace the logic again, neutrally reporting the source's view. The source views this passage as a direct attack on pragmatism in the church. Pragmatic worship tends to evaluate success based on what works to draw a crowd, often treating the congregation as consumers of an experience or entertainment.
The source contends that this pragmatic approach is utterly incompatible with Psalm 96.
How so?
The biblical text views the congregation not as an audience to be entertained, but as subjects who must bring tribute and bow in trembling reverence before a holy king.
Oh.
The source argues that the demand for holy fear in verse 9 cannot be reconciled with worship designed primarily to cater to human preferences. The parameters for worship are established by God's holiness, not market research.
That brings us to the final movement of the text, verses 11 through 13, focusing on cosmic rejoicing and the coming judge.
Okay.
Verse 11 says, "Let the heavens rejoice, and let the earth be glad. Let the sea roar, and the fullness thereof. Let the field be joyful, and all that is therein. Then shall all the trees of the wood rejoice." This is a massive, vivid personification of nature.
It is an incredible literary device. The heavens, the earth, the sea, the fields, and the trees are all given voices and emotions. They are commanded to erupt in joy.
Let's use an analogy to capture the feeling of this text. Imagine a captive nation that has been under the boot of a vicious tyrant for generations.
Okay.
The people are starved, oppressed, living in constant fear and darkness. Then one day, they hear a sound in the distance. It is the rhythmic thumping of drums.
Oh, wow.
It is an approaching liberating army led by their rightful benevolent king. As the army gets closer, the people don't just feel a mild sense of happiness. The very landscape seems to vibrate with the anticipation of freedom.
Yeah.
The ground physically shakes with the marching feet. The air echoes with the horns. The physical environment itself seems to brace for liberation from the tyrant.
That analogy perfectly captures the theological reality the psalmist is portraying. This text connects directly to the biblical theological concept that the physical cosmos is waiting for liberation from the curse of the fall. In the New Testament, Romans 8 speaks of the whole creation groaning, subjected to futility, waiting for redemption.
Ah, yes.
Psalm 96 looks forward to the precise moment when that groaning turns into roaring, exultant joy because the rightful king has arrived to lift the curse from the material world.
And that arrival is spelled out in verse 13. "Before the Lord, for he cometh to judge the earth. He shall judge the world with righteousness and the people with his truth." Notice the intense repetition, "for he cometh, for he cometh."
That repetition builds immense anticipation. The Hebrew word for he comes is ba. It is an active participle.
What does that mean for the text?
This grammatical form indicates an imminent, certain arrival. It is not just a vague promise for the distant future. The action is already underway in the mind of the author. He is already on his way. The arrival is inevitable.
And when he arrives, he judges by two specific standards: righteousness and truth. Let's look at the Hebrew concepts behind those English words.
The word for righteousness is tzedek, which denotes moral straightness and perfect justice that aligns with God's character.
Okay.
The word for truth or faithfulness is emunah. It means he's completely reliable and constant. He will evaluate the earth according to his own flawless, steady character.
So there will be no perversion of justice.
Right. No bribes accepted, no false testimonies allowed.
Thinking about the original audience of returning exiles, the authorial intent here seems to be providing absolute eschatological stability.
That is the goal. Whether it was the Israelites facing the Philistines in David's era, or the small remnant facing the threat of Persian governors after the exile, they were surrounded by temporal political upheaval and danger.
Yeah.
The author intended for them to look past those immediate, terrifying threats and anchor their souls in the absolute certainty of the true king's arrival. Human empires like Babylon and Persia will rise and fall into dust, but the arrival of the judge is fixed and unalterable.
Applying this to you, the listener, today, the commentaries assert that the text demands vigilance, endurance, and a radical alignment of your life with the coming kingdom. It challenges you to prioritize eternal realities over temporal comforts, because the judge is literally on his way.
The imminence of his arrival changes how you live today. It demands that you evaluate your actions, your allegiances, and your priorities against the standard of tzedek and emunah, righteousness and truth, rather than the shifting standards of the current culture.
Our source material is one final, highly specific critique in this section, targeting modern sociological frameworks.
Okay.
The source contends that verse 13 acts as a complete refutation of Marxist categories, critical race theory, and intersectional narratives of social justice. Let's break down the author's logical progression here, just conveying their argument neutrally.
Right.
How does a 3,000-year-old poem connect to 21st century sociology?
The author argues that biblical justice, defined by tzedek and meshurim, righteousness and equity, relies entirely on the objective, unchanging standard of God's truth.
Okay.
True justice is the perfect administration of God's law. Modern secular philosophies, however, attempt to redefine justice based on temporal group identities, shifting cultural dynamics, and subjective sociological categories.
So the source sees a fundamental clash of definitions.
Yes. The source maintains that you cannot harmonize a justice system based on God's objective, eternal character with a justice system based on human categorization and cultural grievance.
I get it.
The author sees these modern frameworks as a departure from the standard established by the coming judge, substituting human philosophy for divine decree.
Right. We have walked through the history, the literary setting, and the three main movements of the text. Now we pivot to the culmination of our deep dive.
The Christological fulfillment.
Yes. We need to look at how this entire psalm finds its climax in Jesus Christ. And we want to do this by tracing the actual theological threads, rather than forcing an artificial allegory onto the text.
The connections are structurally massive. Let's trace them, starting with the concept of the Creator in the first section.
Right.
In verse 5, Yahweh is praised for making the heavens, but the Lord made the heavens. When we turn to the New Testament, specifically texts like John 1.3 and Colossians 1.16, the pre-incarnate word Jesus Christ is explicitly identified as the active agent of creation.
All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made.
Right. Therefore, Christ is the antitype of every false god. If the gods of the nations are Elohim, worthless nothings, Christ possesses absolute cosmic preeminence over them because he actually made the material world.
Oh, wow.
The praise directed to the Creator in Psalm 96 is praise directed to the Son.
Then we have the concept of salvation in verse 2, commanding the earth to show forth his salvation from day to day.
We noted earlier that the Hebrew word for salvation here is Yeshuado, which directly points to the name Yeshua, Jesus.
Yeah.
The new song that the earth is commanded to sing is, in its final redemptive fulfillment, the Song of the Lamb mentioned in Revelation 5.9.
Okay.
It is a song of redemption purchased not by the blood of bulls and goats, but by Christ's own blood. He is the actual substance of the salvation that the psalmist is commanding the nations to herald.
Let's look at the sanctuary and the offering. Verse 8 commands the bringing of an offering, a mincha, into his courts. Verse 9 demands worship in the beauty of holiness. How does Christ fulfill these specific demands?
Well, this touches on the theological doctrine of total depravity. Because human beings are fallen and corrupted by sin, we possess no inherent beauty of holiness.
Right.
We have no flawless, acceptable tribute to bring to a perfectly holy God on our own merit. Christ fulfills this by being both the true high priest and the perfect mincha, the flawless offering.
Okay.
Furthermore, he provides his own imputed righteousness to the believer.
Let's explain imputed righteousness clearly for the listener. Imagine you are invited to a royal banquet, but you are covered in mud and wearing filthy rags.
Not a good look.
Right. You cannot enter the throne room in that condition. You'll be thrown out, or worse. Imputed righteousness is like the prince himself stepping out, taking off his own pristine, flawless royal robe and placing it over your shoulders. His perfect record, his clean garments, are credited to your account.
That is the exact mechanism. Because we lack the holy attire required to stand in the sanctuary, Christ covers us with his righteousness.
Wow.
It is the beauty in which believers are able to worship. Without him acting as the covering, approaching the holy God of Psalm 96 would result in immediate destruction.
Finally, the coming judge in verse 13. For he cometh to judge the earth.
This points directly to the Parousia, the literal second advent of Christ. The theological sources we are examining present a specific premillennial view of this text. They argue that this is not just a spiritualized metaphor for the church age, where Christ reigns only invisibly in the hearts of believers.
Right.
Rather, it anticipates the actual physical return of Christ to earth.
Meaning he will literally sit upon the throne of David.
Yes. The premillennial view holds that he will return physically to lift the curse from the natural world, which connects perfectly back to the trees of the wood rejoicing and the fields exulting.
Right.
Christ will judge the nations with absolute equity, mesharim, and rule in perfect righteousness. He is the imminent coming judge that the entire cosmos is bracing for.
Let's synthesize this massive scope.
Yeah.
We've traveled a vast distance in this deep dive.
We really have.
Psalm 96 starts with the localized glory of the Davidic tabernacle, the ark resting on Mount Zion. It then moves into the rubble of the Babylonian exile, where a broken people declare the universal reign of their God over the false idols of the empires. It explodes outward into a global mandate, commanding all the families of the nations to sing a new song and declare the gospel of his salvation. It demands absolute prostration, a bringing of tribute, and holy trembling before the Creator. And it culminates in the physical return of Jesus Christ to judge the earth in perfect righteousness.
Yeah.
An event so massive that the oceans roar and the forests sing in anticipation.
It is a text that allows no neutral ground. It demands a response from every human being and every aspect of creation. The king has issued the decree.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought for you, the listener, built directly on this source material. We talked about that vivid imagery of nature.
Right.
If the insentient trees of the forest and the roaring, chaotic seas are already bracing themselves with joyful anticipation for the physical return of the king, well, how much more should you, as a thinking, feeling human being, examine your own daily posture?
It's a heavy question.
It is. Are you living your life awaiting him with casual indifference? Or are you awaiting him with trembling, joyful readiness? Because the summons is not an optional invitation, and the king is already on his way. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.